Please, somebody help us. My wife, she's dying." The words tore through the frozen night air like a gunshot. Walter Callahan collapsed onto his knees in the snow outside the clubhouse, his wife's limp body cradled against his chest. Through the frosted windows, shadowy figures stopped, mid-motion beer bottles, suspended halfway to lips, pool cues frozen above felt tables. The old man's face was a mask of desperation, tears freezing on his weathered cheeks as Dorothy's lips turned blue in his arms. Before we dive into this incredible story, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now because what you're about to hear will restore your faith in humanity. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Stick with me until the end because the twist in this tale will leave you speechless. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees below zero when Walter felt Dorothy's knees buckle beneath her. They'd been walking for 3 hours since their '98 Ford pickup had wheezed its last breath on Route 47, steam billowing from under the hood like a dying dragon. The heater had given out first, then the engine followed, leaving them stranded on a back road where cell service was a fantasy and passing cars were rarer than summer snow. Walter, I can't feel my legs anymore." Dorothy whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind that whipped through the pine trees lining the frozen highway. Walter's heart lurched. He'd fought in Korea, survived Chosin Reservoir, where men froze standing up, their weapons fused to their hands by ice. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever terrified him like the sound of his wife's voice fading to nothing. "You stay with me, Dot. You hear me? We didn't come this far to quit now." His own fingers were numb inside his worn gloves, his boots crunching through snow that had drifted knee-deep in places. "That clubhouse can't be more than another mile. I saw the sign back at the junction." Dorothy's response was a barely perceptible nod. Her face had taken on a waxy pallor that made Walter's stomach twist. The cancer had already stolen so much from her, her energy, her appetite, the rose gold color that used to bloom in her cheeks when she laughed. Now hypothermia was reaching for what little remained. "Tell me about the beach house again," Dorothy murmured, her words slurring together. "The one we stayed at when Tommy was little." Walter felt panic flood his veins. She was trying to distract herself from the cold, from the pain, from the very real possibility that they might not make it. "The one in Oceanside with the blue shutters. Thomas built that sandcastle. Took him all afternoon. And you took about 100 pictures of it," Walter said, forcing cheerfulness into his voice, even as Dorothy stumbled again. He caught her, his arthritic shoulder screaming in protest as he took more of her weight. "You made him pose next to it like he'd built the Taj Mahal." A faint smile crossed Dorothy's face, then vanished as quickly as it had come. He was so proud. Why did everything go so wrong, Walter? The question landed like a physical blow. 7 years. 7 years since they'd spoken to their son. 7 years since Thomas had slammed the door of their home in Millbrook and never looked back. The argument echoed in Walter's memory even now. Accusations shouted unforgivable words, hurled like grenades, the sound of Thomas's truck peeling out of the driveway at 2 a.m. "We're fixing it, Dot. That's what this trip is about, remember? We're going to see Tommy. We're going to meet our grandson." Walter's voice cracked on the last word. Dorothy had only learned about the plea 3 months ago, a brief mention in a letter from Thomas's ex-wife, Sarah. A photograph had been included, a tow-headed 7-year-old with Thomas's stubborn chin and Dorothy's gentle eyes. The cancer diagnosis had come 2 weeks later. Stage 4, inoperable, 6 months, maybe less. Dorothy had looked at Walter across the kitchen table, that photograph clutched in her shaking hands, and said 5 words, "I need to see him." So they'd started driving. From Millbrook, Illinois towards Silver Falls, Montana, where Sarah's letter had been postmarked. 1,300 miles with a dying woman and a truck that was already 26 years old when they started. Walter had known it was crazy. He'd known it was dangerous. But when Dorothy looked at him with those eyes, the same eyes that had convinced him to marry her in 1967, to buy that first house, to believe that life could be beautiful, even when it was hard, he couldn't say no. He'd never been able to say no to Dorothy. Now, as she sagged against him, her breathing shallow and rapid, Walter wondered if his inability to refuse her had finally killed them both. The wind picked up driving snow into his face like needles. Through the blur of white, he could make out a glow in the distance, artificial light spilling from windows, the promise of warmth. The clubhouse. It had to be. Almost there, sweetheart. Just a little further. Dorothy didn't respond. Her eyes had closed, her head lolling against his shoulder. Walter's pulse hammered in his throat. He'd read about hypothermia in his veterans magazines. Knew the stages: confusion, slurred speech, drowsiness. The final stage was the worst paradoxical undressing, they called it, when victims became so disoriented they'd tear off their clothes despite freezing to death, their brains too damaged to register reality. Dorothy, open your eyes. He shook her gently, then harder when she didn't respond. Dorothy Ann Callahan, you open your eyes right now. Her eyelids fluttered. Tired, Walter. So tired. I know, baby, I know. But you gotta stay awake for me. Can you do that? Can you stay awake? She didn't answer. Her full weight was on him now, 108 pounds that felt like 800. Walter's legs trembled with each step. His own body was shutting down, he could feel it. His toes had gone numb an hour ago. His fingers weren't much better. The old shrapnel wound in his left thigh was screaming the cold, making the metal fragments that doctors had never been able to fully remove feel like they were grinding against bone. But he kept walking, one foot in front of the other, left, right, the military cadence he'd learned 53 years ago, marching through snow in a country that wasn't his own, fighting a war he'd never fully understood. At least then he'd had boots that fit and a rifle to keep him warm. Now all he had was Dorothy growing colder by the second and a desperate hope that anyone would help them. The clubhouse materialized out of the blizzard like a mirage. Low-slung building, log construction motorcycles lined up outside covered in snow like sleeping metal beasts. A neon sign buzzed over the door. Devil's Backbone MC. Below it in smaller letters, members only. Walter had never been near a motorcycle club in his life. The news stories about the Hells Angels, about gang violence and drug trafficking played at the edges of his consciousness. But Dorothy was dying in his arms, and the clubhouse was the only light for miles. He staggered toward the door. Through the frosted windows, he could see movement men in leather vests, women with long hair, the flicker of a television in the corner. Music thumped from inside, bass notes that made the windows rattle. Walter tried the door. Locked. Of course it was locked. He pounded on it with his fist, the impact sending jolts of pain through his frozen knuckles. Help! Please, somebody, help us. Nothing. The music was too loud. They couldn't hear him. Walter looked down at Dorothy. Her face had gone slack, her breathing so shallow he had to press his ear to her mouth to confirm she was still alive. Terror gave him strength he didn't know he possessed. He hammered on the door again, harder, using both fists, putting his whole body into it. Please, my wife is dying, somebody help us. Inside, the music cut off. Footsteps approached the door. Walter felt a surge of hope, so intense it made him dizzy. The door opened a crack. A man's face appeared in the gap, hard features, graying beard eyes that had seen things Walter could only imagine. A leather vest with patches. Devil's Backbone, MC Sergeant at Arms. The man looked at Walter, then at Dorothy in his arms, and his expression didn't change. Private property, the man said. Members only. Please, Walter gasped. My wife hypothermia, we need help. There's a hospital in Copper Ridge, 30 miles north. The man started to close the door. Walter's hand shot out, stopping it. She won't make it 30 miles. Look at her. Look at her. The man's eyes dropped to Dorothy. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in those hard features. Then his face closed off again. Not our problem, old man. Move your hand. I'm begging you. Walter's voice broke. His knees were giving out. He could feel himself starting to fall. Dorothy's weight pulling them both down. Please, I'm begging. His legs buckled. Walter crashed to his knees in the snow, still clutching Dorothy against his chest. The impact sent shockwaves of pain through his body, but he barely registered it. All he could think about was Dorothy's face blue-tinged and still her breath coming in tiny puffs of vapor that grew fainter with each second. Please, he whispered one more time. Please help us. The door hung open. The man stood there frozen. Behind him, other faces appeared, more leather vests, more hard eyes, men and women who looked like they'd carved their lives out of stone and steel. They stared at the old couple in the snow like they were watching a movie, something that was happening to someone else in some other world. None of them moved. Walter felt something inside him break, not his body that had already broken miles ago. This was deeper, This was the part of him that had survived war and loss and 7 years of not speaking to his son. The part that had held on to hope even when Dorothy's diagnosis had stolen their future. That part crumbled like sand. "We just want to see our grandson," he heard himself say. Tears were streaming down his face now, freezing in his beard. "That's all. We just want to see our boy's boy before she. He couldn't finish. The words dissolved into sobs that racked his entire body. He bent over Dorothy, sheltering her from the wind, with his own body knowing it wouldn't be enough. Knowing that in a few minutes, or maybe a few hours, someone would find them frozen together in the parking lot of a biker bar, died, trying to reach a son who might not even want to see them. Jesus Christ. The voice came from inside the clubhouse, different from the first man, younger, rougher around the edges. Walter looked up through his tears to see a massive figure pushing through the crowd at the door. 6'4", at least maybe 250 pounds, with a beard that hung halfway down his chest and arms covered in tattoos. His vest had different patches, a road captain, Grizzly. The man Grizzly stepped out into the snow. He moved with surprising grace for someone his size, dropping to one knee beside Walter and Dorothy. His hands, scarred and enormous, reached for Dorothy's throat, fingers seeking her pulse. "How long's she been out?" Grizzly demanded. "Few minutes. Maybe more. I can't." "How far do you walk?" 3 hours. Maybe 4. The truck broke down on Route 47 and there was nobody. No cars, nothing. And I knew there was a building out here because I saw the sign and... "Shut up!" Grizzly's fingers were still on Dorothy's throat. His face was a mask of concentration. "Pulse is thready, respiration's shallow, skin's cold and waxy." He looked up at the crowd in the doorway. "Somebody get me every blanket we've got. Now." The crowd exploded into motion. The first man, the sergeant at arms, disappeared inside. Others followed, shouting orders Walter couldn't make out over the wind. Grizzly scooped Dorothy out of Walter's arms like she weighed nothing. "Can you stand, old man?" Walter tried. Failed. His legs had turned to rubber. Without hesitation, Grizzly jerked his head toward the clubhouse. "Axel, Tiny, get out here and help this guy inside." 2 more bikers emerged. They grabbed Walter under the arms, hauling him to his feet. His legs dragged uselessly as they carried him through the door into a blast of warmth that felt like walking into another dimension. The clubhouse interior was exactly what Walter had expected, and nothing like it at all. Pool table in the corner bar along one wall. Confederate and American flags hanging from exposed beams. But it was warm, gloriously, impossibly warm. And the men and women who'd stood frozen in the doorway moments ago were moving with the precision of a military unit. "Clear the pool table," Grizzly barked. "Get those balls out of the way." Hands swept the table clean. Grizzly laid Dorothy down on the green felt with surprising gentleness. Someone thrust blankets at him, quilts, sleeping bags, even what looked like someone's leather jacket. Grizzly began wrapping Dorothy like she was made of glass. "Space heater. Somebody get a space heater over here." A woman with purple hair and sleeve tattoos dragged a heater across the floor, plugging it in near the pool table. "Not too close, we warm her up gradually or we'll shock her system." Grizzly was shouting orders like a field commander. "Cheryl, get on the phone to Doc Matthews. I don't care if he's off the clock, tell him we need him here now. Axel, boil water, lots of it. We're going to need hot water bottles." The woman Cheryl was already on a cell phone, pacing near the bar. "Doc, yeah, it's Cheryl from Devil's Backbone. We got a situation? Hypothermia severe." Yeah, I know, but Doc, just get your ass out here." Walter stood swaying on his feet, supported by the 2 bikers who'd carried him inside. His brain couldn't process what was happening. These were Hell's Angels, or whatever they called themselves, Devil's Backbone. These were the people the news warned you about, the ones you crossed the street to avoid. But they were saving Dorothy's life. "You," Grizzly pointed at Walter without looking up from Dorothy. "What's your name?" "Walter. Walter Callahan." "Walter, when's the last time you ate?" Walter tried to remember. "Breakfast, maybe. I don't..." "Tiny, get this man some food. Soup if we got it. Something hot." Grizzly's hands were moving, constantly adjusting blankets, checking Dorothy's pulse, monitoring her breathing. "And get his boots off. Check for frostbite." The biker called Tiny, who was anything but tiny, easily 300 pounds, guided Walter to a chair near the space heater. Within seconds, someone thrust a bowl of soup into his hands. Chicken noodle steam rising from the surface. Walter's stomach lurched at the smell. Drink, Tiny ordered. It wasn't a suggestion. Walter drank. The soup burned his throat going down, but he barely noticed. His eyes were locked on Dorothy across the room. She looked so small on that pool table, swallowed by blankets, her face still that terrible waxy color. Is she going to make it? Walter whispered. Tiny didn't answer. He was unlacing Walter's boots with hands that seemed too big for the delicate task. When the boots came off, Walter heard Tiny suck in a breath. Grizzly, we got frostbite over here. Walter looked down. His toes were white and purple, the skin tight and shiny. He couldn't feel them at all. Grizzly glanced over, his face grim. How bad? Second degree, maybe worse. Couple of the toes look like third. Can't do anything about it right now. Keep him warm, get circulation going. We'll worry about his feet after the wife's stable. Grizzly turned back to Dorothy. Talk to me, Cheryl. Where's Doc? 10 minutes out. He's bringing his full kit. Good. Tell him we're going to need IV fluids warmed if possible. And tell him to bring his O2 tank. Walter watched this stranger, this biker with a face like weathered granite and hands like steel traps, work on his wife with the efficiency of a trained medic. How do you know how to do this? The question escaped before Walter could stop it. Grizzly's eyes flicked to him for a second. Army, 2 tours in Afghanistan. I was a combat medic before I was a mechanic. He went back to adjusting Dorothy's blankets. Now shut up and let me work. The front door banged open. A man in his 60s rushed in carrying a large medical bag and trailing snow. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a parka over what looked like pajamas. Where is she? Here, Doc. Grizzly stepped back, giving the doctor room to work. Doc Matthews moved to the pool table, his hands already reaching for Dorothy's wrist. He pressed his stethoscope to her chest, listened, frowned, pulled out a thermometer and slipped it under her tongue. The clubhouse had gone silent. Every person in the room was watching the doctor work. The only sounds were the hum of the space heater and Dorothy's shallow breathing. Doc Matthews pulled the thermometer out. His face went pale. 87 degrees. She's in severe hypothermia. He looked at Grizzly. How long? Don't know exactly. Husband says they were walking for 3, maybe 4 hours. Jesus. Doc was pulling supplies from his bag. IV kit bags of fluid portable oxygen tank. We need to get her to a hospital. She needs controlled rewarming cardiac monitoring. No hospitals. Grizzly's voice was flat. Doc Matthews froze. Excuse me. The nearest hospital is Copper Ridge, 30 miles in a blizzard with roads that aren't plowed. She wouldn't make it 10 miles. She might not make it here, Grizzly. This woman needs... She needs to not die in the next hour. Can you keep her alive or not? The two men stared at each other. The temperature in the room seemed to drop despite the heater. Walter felt his heart hammering in his chest. Finally, Doc Matthews looked away. I'll do what I can, but if she codes, if her heart stops, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Grizzly stepped aside. Do your work, Doc. The doctor got to work inserting an IV with hands that shook slightly. The bag of fluids hung from a coat hook someone had hammered into the beam above the pool table. Oxygen tubing went under Dorothy's nose. Walter watched it all from his chair. Tiny still working on his feet, wrapping them in warm towels and massaging gently to restore circulation. The pain when it came was excruciating, like thousands of needles stabbing into his flesh simultaneously. He bit back a scream. That's good, Tiny said quietly. Pain means the tissue's still alive. It's when you don't feel nothing that you worry. Across the room, Doc Matthews was listening to Dorothy's heart again. He looked up at Grizzly and shook his head slightly. Heart rate's irregular. She's not out of the woods. Grizzly's jaw tightened. What do you need? A miracle would be nice. Doc adjusted the oxygen flow. Failing that, we keep her warm, keep her stable, and pray her heart doesn't give out. Walter tried to stand. I need to be with her. Tiny pushed him back down. You need to let the doc work, and you need to get your own core temperature up before you join your wife in hypothermia land. But no buts, old man. You're no good to her dead. The harsh words landed like slaps. Walter slumped back in the chair, tears streaming down his face again. He'd failed her. He'd failed Dorothy. His stupid pride, his desperate need to reconnect with Thomas before it was too late, had nearly killed the only person who'd ever truly loved him. A hand landed on his shoulder. Walter looked up to find Grizzly standing over him, his face unreadable. "What's the story?" Grizzly asked. "And don't bullshit me. Where were you going? Why were you out on Route 47 in the middle of a blizzard?" Walter swallowed hard. "Silver Falls, Montana. We were, we were going to see our son in the middle of winter in a truck that was clearly about to die. We didn't have a choice." The words came out broken. "Dorothy has cancer. Stage 4. The doctor said, they said 6 months, maybe less. That was 4 months ago." Grizzly's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "And your son lives in Silver Falls?" "We think so. We haven't talked to him in 7 years." Walter's voice dropped to a whisper. "We had a fight. A bad one. Things were said that shouldn't have been said. He left. Changed his number. We didn't know where he was until his ex-wife sent a letter 3 months ago." "What did the letter say?" "That Thomas had a son, our grandson, 7 years old. Dorothy we'd never met him." Walter looked at his wife, still and pale, on the pool table. "When Dorothy got her diagnosis, all she wanted was to see the boy. Just once. Before he couldn't finish. Didn't need to." Grizzly was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the clubhouse had returned to a low murmur of activity. People checking on Dorothy, stoking the fire in the wood stove in the corner, making coffee. But there was a new tension in the air, a current running beneath the surface that Walter couldn't quite identify. "What did you fight about?" Grizzly asked finally. "You and your son." Walter closed his eyes. "Money, at least that's what started it. Thomas wanted to buy a business, a garage. He asked us for help with the down payment. We just retired and our savings they were tight. We said no." He paused. "But it wasn't really about the money. It was about control, about me thinking I knew better than him, about Dorothy trying to keep the peace and just making everything worse. It was about 25 years of little resentments and unspoken disappointments all coming out at once." "What did he say when he left?" Walter's voice cracked. "He said he was done, that he'd spent his whole life trying to be good enough for us and he was tired of failing, that we could keep our money and our disappointment and he never wanted to see us again." The words hung in the air like smoke. Grizzly was silent, his massive arms crossed over his chest. "I tried to call," Walter continued. "For the first year I must have called 100 times. Then the number was disconnected. I hired a private investigator, but he came up empty. It was like Thomas had just vanished." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Dorothy never gave up hope. She'd talk about him like he was just away on a trip, like he'd walk through the door any day. And then that letter came and there was a photo of this little boy who looked just like Thomas did at that age, and Dorothy she lit up. For the first time since the diagnosis, she had something to live for." "So you got in a truck that was older than most of the bikes outside and drove into a blizzard?" "Yes." "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard," Grizzly said flatly. Walter's head snapped up, anger flaring. "I know it was dumb. You think I don't know that, but what was I supposed to do? Watch her die without even trying? She's my wife. She's been my wife for 56 years, and if she wants to see our grandson before she goes, then God damn it, I'm going to make it happen." The outburst left him breathless. Around the clubhouse, conversations had stopped. Everyone was staring at him. Grizzly's expression still hadn't changed. "You done?" Walter deflated. "Yeah, I'm done." "Good. Because here's what's going to happen. Doc's going to stabilize your wife. Then we're going to get some real food in the both of you, and you're going to sleep for a few hours. In the morning when the storm breaks, we're going to put you in a plane that's a car for you civilians, and we're going to drive you to Silver Falls." Walter blinked. "What? You heard me. We're taking you to see your son." "But why would you do that?" For the first time, something like emotion crossed Grizzly's face. "Because I got a son too, and I haven't talked to him in 3 years. And every day I wake up thinking today's the day I'm going to call him, and every day I find a reason not to." He looked at Dorothy. "Your wife doesn't have the luxury of someday. Neither do you. So yeah, we're going to help you, because maybe if you can fix your mess, the rest of us can figure out how to fix ours." Walter felt something crack open in his chest, not breaking, but opening, like a door he'd kept locked for 7 years finally swinging wide. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just don't die on us." Grizzly turned to the room. "You all hear that? We got a mission tomorrow. Walter and Dorothy Callahan are going to Silver Falls to see their family, and we're making damn sure they get there. Anybody got a problem with that? The clubhouse erupted, not in protest and agreement. Fists pounded on tables. Voices rose in a chorus of support. These hardened bikers, these men and women who looked like they'd been carved from granite and violence, rallied around two strangers like they were family. Walter wept. He couldn't help it. The relief, the exhaustion, the overwhelming gratitude, they all crashed over him at once, and he sobbed like a child while Tiny awkwardly patted his shoulder and someone pressed another bowl of soup into his hands. Across the room, Doc Matthews was checking Dorothy's vitals again. He caught Grizzly's eye and gave a small nod. Not out of the woods yet, but stable. For now. Grizzly walked back to the pool table. He stood there for a moment looking down at Dorothy's still form, then reached out and adjusted her blankets one more time. "Hang in there, Mrs. Callahan," he said quietly. "You got a grandson to meet. Don't you dare check out before you see his face." And in that moment, watching this massive tattooed biker tend to his dying wife with hands that were gentle despite their scars, Walter understood something fundamental about the human heart. Kindness doesn't wear a uniform. It doesn't come with a resume or a background check. Sometimes it shows up in the most unlikely places, worn by the most unlikely people, offered when you least expect it and need it most. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of Devil's Backbone MC Clubhouse. Inside, surrounded by strangers who were becoming something more. Walter Callahan finally allowed himself to hope. Dorothy's grandson was waiting in Silver Falls, and tomorrow, God willing, she was going to meet him. Dorothy's eyes opened at 4:47 a.m. Walter was slumped in a chair beside the pool table, half asleep, when he felt her hand twitch in his. His head snapped up so fast his neck cracked. "Dot." Her lips moved. No sound came out at first, just a whisper of breath. Walter leaned closer, his heart slamming against his ribs. "Where?" Dorothy's voice was barely audible. "Where are we?" "We're safe. We're somewhere safe." Walter's hand tightened around hers. "You're going to be okay." Her eyes, still glassy with the confusion, drifted around the room. The clubhouse was dim now, most of the overhead lights turned off. A few bikers were crashed on couches in the corner. The space heater still hummed beside the pool table, and Dorothy was buried under what looked like every blanket the clubhouse owned. I can't remember. The truck broke down, we walked, you collapsed. These people, these bikers, they saved your life." Dorothy's gaze found his face. Even exhausted, even half-conscious, she could read him like a book. "You're crying." Walter hadn't realized he was. He wiped his eyes with his free, not letting go of her with the other. "I thought I lost you." "Not yet." The faintest smile crossed her lips. Still got a grandson to meet." Before Walter could respond, footsteps approached. Grizzly appeared out of the shadows, moving quietly for such a large man. He'd been sleeping on one of the couches, still fully dressed, boots and all. "She's awake." It wasn't a question. "Just now," Walter said. Grizzly moved to the other side of the pool table, his eyes scanning Dorothy with the same clinical precision he had shown hours earlier. "Mrs. Callahan, can you tell me your full name?" Dorothy's brow furrowed. Dorothy Ann Callahan." "What year is it?" 2000 and..." She paused, thinking. 26. "Good. You know where you are?" "Somewhere I probably shouldn't be." Her voice was getting stronger. "Biker bar." A smile tugged at the corner of Grizzly's mouth. "Close enough. You gave us quite a scare." "I gave myself quite a scare." Dorothy tried to sit up. The movement made her wince, and Grizzly's hand shot out, steadying her. "It's easy. You've been through hell. Doc Matthews said you need to take it slow." "How slow? We have to get to Silver Falls?" "Doc's coming back at 6 to check on you again. If he clears you, we leave at 7. Dorothy's eyes widened. You didn't think we'd send you back out there alone, did you?" Grizzly crossed his arms. "Storm's supposed to break around dawn. Roads will still be a mess, but we've got vehicles that can handle it. And we've got people who know every back road between here and Montana." "You don't have to do this," Walter said, even though the thought of trying to make the journey alone made his chest tight with fear. "Yeah, we do." Grizzly's voice was flat, brooking no argument. "Now both of you need to get some real sleep. We've got about 90 minutes before Doc shows up. Use them." He walked away before either of them could protest. Walter watched him go, then looked back at Dorothy. Her eyes were already starting to close again. Walter? Yeah, these are good people. Yeah, Walter whispered. I think they are. At 6:15 a.m., Doc Matthews declared Dorothy stable enough to travel. At 6:47, the clubhouse exploded into organized chaos. Axel, get the Suburban running and check the tire chains. Grizzly's voice cut through the early morning air like a whip. Cheryl, I need those supply bags, packed food, water, blankets, first aid kit. Tiny, you're driving the chase vehicle. Take the F-250. Walter stood near the door, bundled in a parka someone had loaned him. Watching the Devil's Backbone MC transform into something that looked disturbingly like a military convoy preparing for deployment. 6 vehicles were being loaded in the parking lot, 2 pickup trucks the Suburban Grizzly had mentioned, and 3 SUVs that had seen better days but looked like they could drive through a brick wall. Dorothy sat in a wheelchair someone had produced from God knows where, also wrapped in borrowed winter gear. Her color was better, but she still looked fragile. Doc Matthews hovered nearby, checking her pulse every few minutes, like he expected her to flatline at any moment. This is insane, the doctor muttered. She should be in a hospital. She should be in Silver Falls, Dorothy corrected him. Her voice was weak but determined. And if these people are willing to help us get there, I'm not arguing. A woman with purple hair, Cheryl Walter remembered, appeared with 2 paper bags, breakfast sandwiches, egg and sausage, and coffee. She thrust the bags at Walter. You're going to need your strength. Thank you. Really, I don't know how to... Don't. Cheryl's face was hard, but her eyes were kind. Just get to your son. That's thanks enough. Grizzly emerged from the clubhouse carrying what looked like a tactical radio. He barked something at Axel, who was already in the driver's seat of the Suburban, then turned to survey the parking lot. His gaze landed on Walter and Dorothy. You two ready? As we'll ever be, Walter said. Good. You're riding in the Suburban with me and Axel. Doc's coming too, just in case. The others will run interference, 1 truck ahead, 1 behind, SUVs flanking. If we hit trouble, we've got backup. What kind of trouble are you expecting? Dorothy asked. Grizzly's expression was grim. The kind that happens when you drive through a blizzard's aftermath on back roads that aren't maintained. Down trees, rock slides, ice patches that'll flip a vehicle before you know what hit you. Plus, we're going through territory where Devil's Backbone isn't exactly welcome. Walter felt his stomach drop. What do you mean? Means there's another club up North Iron Cross, MC. We've got history, bad history. Their territory starts about 50 miles from here, and Silver Falls is right in the middle of it. Grizzly's jaw tightened. But they're not going to stop us. Nothing's going to stop us. Understood? It wasn't a question. It was a promise. At 7 o'clock sharp, the convoy rolled out. Walter sat in the back seat of the Suburban, Dorothy beside him with her head on his shoulder. Doc Matthews rode shotgun, his medical bag clutched in his lap. Axel drove with the steady confidence of someone who'd navigated worse roads in worse conditions. Grizzly sat behind Axel, the tactical radio in his hand, and calling out updates to the other vehicles. Lead truck, what's your visual? The radio crackled. Road's clear for now, Grizz. Visibility's maybe quarter mile. Snow's still coming down, but it's lighter. Copy that. Maintain the speed at 40. Don't outrun your headlights. The landscape outside was a white nightmare. Snow had drifted across the highway in places, creating obstacles that forced Axel to navigate carefully. The plow trucks hadn't made it out here yet, might not make it for days. The convoy was on its own. Dorothy stirred against Walter's shoulder. How far to Silver Falls? 160 miles, Grizzly said without turning around. 4 hours in good conditions. Today 6, maybe 7, maybe more if we hit complications. We'll make it, Dorothy said softly. We have to. Nobody responded to that. The Suburban's heater blasted warm air, but Walter still felt cold. Not from the temperature, from the weight of everything riding on this journey. They were asking these strangers to risk their lives, their vehicles, their safety, all for 2 old people trying to fix a broken family. Why are you really doing this? The question escaped before Walter could stop it. Grizzly was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than Walter had heard it. You know what the hardest part of war is? It's not the fighting. It's not even watching your buddies die. It's coming home and realizing the person you were before is gone, and the people you love don't know how to talk to the person you became. Walter waited. Behind the wheel, Axel's hands tightened slightly. I came back from Afghanistan in 2012, Grizzly continued. 2 tours, 3 years total. Saw things that'll never leave my head. Did things I'll never talk about. When I got home, my son was 11. Smart kid, loved baseball, loved science class, loved his old man. He paused. But his old man didn't come back. I did, but the version of me he remembered, that guy died in a firefight outside Kandahar. Dorothy's hand found Walter's. Squeezed. I tried, Grizzly said. God knows I tried. But I was angry all the time. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't sit still. Couldn't be in crowds without my hand going for a weapon that wasn't there. My wife, ex-wife now, she tried to help. But how do you help someone who won't admit they're broken? His voice went hard. I started drinking, started fights, started pushing away everyone who gave a damn about me. And one day my son looked at me and said, "You're not my dad anymore." He was 14. The Suburban hit a patch of ice. Axel compensated smoothly, but the momentary slide made everyone tense. Haven't seen him since, Grizzly finished. He's 17 now, living with his mother in Seattle. I've got his number. I've typed out text messages 1,000 times, never hit send. He finally turned to look at Walter and Dorothy. So yeah, I'm helping you, because maybe if you can cross the finish line, it means the rest of us aren't completely screwed. The radio crackled before anyone could respond. Grizz, we got a problem. Lead truck here. There's a tree down across the highway, big one. We're not getting through without moving it. Grizzly lifted the radio. How big? 30 feet, maybe more. Pine tree looks like the snow load snapped it. Can we go around? Negative. Ditches are too deep, too much snow. We move it or we turn back. Grizzly's face was stone. We're not turning back. Convoy halt. Everyone out. We're clearing this tree. The Suburban slowed to a stop. Through the windshield, Walter could see the lead truck maybe 50 yards ahead, its hazard lights flashing. And beyond it, blocking the entire width of the highway, was a massive pine tree. Stay in the vehicle, Grizzly ordered as he opened his door. Keep warm. This might take a while. Walter watched through the window as the bikers gathered around the fallen tree. There were 12 of them, total 7 men, 5 women. They looked impossibly small against the tree's bulk. The trunk was easily 3 feet in diameter, and the branches spread out like skeletal fingers across the snow-covered asphalt. Grizzly was directing operations, pointing and gesturing. 2 of the bikers disappeared into the back of one of the trucks and returned with chainsaws. The sound of engines roaring to life cut through the morning air. They're going to hurt themselves, Doc Matthews said. His breath fogged the window. That tree weighs tons. Even cut into sections, they'll need heavy equipment to move it. But the bikers were already working. The chainsaws bit into wood, sending up sprays of sawdust. They worked in teams, one person cutting, while others stood ready with ropes and chains. When the first section separated from the trunk, 6 of them grabbed it and heaved muscles, straining boots, slipping on ice. The section moved. Inch by inch, they dragged it to the side of the road. Walter felt something tighten in his chest. These people didn't know him. Didn't know Dorothy. 48 hours ago, they'd been strangers. And now they were out there in single-digit temperatures, moving a tree that could crush them if they made one wrong move, all because 2 old people needed to get to Montana. I don't deserve this, he whispered. Dorothy's hand found his again. Yes, you do. We both do. Everyone deserves a second chance, Walter, even us. The work continued. One section, then another, then another. The chainsaws screamed. The bikers shouted to each other, coordinating lifts, warning about weak ice cursing when branches caught on the asphalt. Grizzly was in the thick of it, his massive frame straining as he helped lift sections that took 3 normal people to move. 30 minutes passed, then 45. Walter's coffee had gone cold. Dorothy had dozed off again, her breathing steady against his shoulder. Doc Matthews watched the work with the critical eye of someone cataloging future injuries. At the 50-minute mark, Grizzly's radio crackled to life, but it wasn't one of his people. The voice that came through was unfamiliar, rough with an edge of menace. Well, well, devil's backbone out for a morning drive. Didn't your mother teach you to stay in your own yard? Grizzly's hand went to the radio, but he didn't respond. His eyes scanned the tree line on both sides of the road. The voice continued. We've been watching you clear that tree. Awful nice of you to do our road maintenance for us. But See, this is Iron Cross territory now, and you boys know you're not welcome here. Walter's heart started hammering. Who is that? Doc Matthews's face had gone pale. Iron Cross MC, the rival club Grizzly mentioned. This is bad. Through the windshield, Walter saw the bikers stop working. They'd all heard the radio transmission. Hands moved toward waistbands, toward pockets. Preparing, Grizzly finally lifted the radio. His voice was calm, almost conversational. Reaper, been a while. Not long enough, Grizz. You want to tell me what you're doing rolling 6 vehicles through my territory at 7 in the morning? Just passing through, no trouble. No trouble, the voice Reaper laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. You bring 12 Devil's Backbone into Iron Cross country, and you say no trouble. That's funny. That's real funny. We're on a timetable, Reaper. Got 2 civilians who need to get to Silver Falls. Medical situation. We clear this tree. We're gone. You never see us again. Silence on the radio. Then, 2 civilians. What, you're running a taxi service now? Something like that. Let me see them. Grizzly's jaw clenched. Not happening. Then you're not passing through. Simple as that. You want to cross Iron Cross territory. I see who you're carrying. Those are the terms. Walter saw Grizzly's hand tighten on the radio. The other bikers were tensing, spreading out slightly, creating defensive positions without seeming to move at all. Stand down, Reaper. This doesn't have to get ugly. Already is ugly, Grizz. You made it ugly when you crossed the line. Now either you show me your passengers, or you turn those vehicles around and crawl back to whatever hole you came from. Dorothy was awake now. She'd heard everything. Her hand clutched Walter so tightly it hurt. What's going to happen? Doc Matthews didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Grizzly. The big biker stood in the middle of the highway, snow falling around him, surrounded by his people. For a long moment he didn't move. Then he turned and looked directly at the Suburban, at Walter and Dorothy through the windshield. The message in his eyes was clear. Your call. Walter's mind raced. They could turn back, go to Copper Ridge, wait out the storm, try to make the journey another time. The safe choice, the smart choice. But Dorothy didn't have another time. The doctors had been clear weeks, maybe a month or 2, if they were lucky. Every day they waited was a day closer to never. Walter made a decision that would change everything. He opened the Suburban's door and stepped out into the snow. Walter, no. Doc Matthews grabbed for him, but Walter was already moving. He walked toward Grizzly, his boots crunching in the snow, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Every eye was on him. The Devil's Backbone bikers, the invisible watchers from Iron Cross, probably even God himself looking down and wondering what this crazy old man thought he was doing. Walter stopped next to Grizzly. I'm Walter Callahan, he called out to the empty forest. His voice cracked, but he pushed on. Korean War veteran. My wife Dorothy is in that vehicle. She's dying, cancer. We're trying to get to Silver Falls to see our grandson before it's too late. That's the whole story. No drugs, no weapons, no trouble. Just 2 old people trying to see family one last time. The forest was silent except for the wind. Then from the tree line, maybe 100 yards north, figures emerged. 8 motorcycles rolled out onto the highway, their riders dressed in black leather with different patches. Iron Cross MC. They moved in formation, engines rumbling, until they formed a line across the road. The rider in front, bigger than Grizzly, with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his eye to his jaw, killed his engine. He climbed off his bike and walked forward, his boots leaving deep prints in the snow. Reaper. He stopped 10 feet from Grizzly and Walter. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over them both. Korean War, huh? What unit? Walter's voice was steady now. 7th Infantry Division. Fought at Chosin Reservoir. Something flickered in Reaper's scarred face. My grandfather fought at Chosin. Came home missing 3 toes and half his sanity. He looked at Grizzly. Your boy telling the truth. Every word, Grizzly said. Reaper studied them for another long moment. Then he turned and looked at the Suburban. At Dorothy's face visible through the window, pale and watching. Cancer, you said? Stage 4, Walter replied. Maybe a month left, maybe less. And you drove into a blizzard to see your grandson. We did. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Reaper's face was unreadable. Or the bravest. Haven't decided which. He looked back at Grizzly. You're really doing this, risking your people, your vehicles for Two strangers? Yeah. Why bust out? Grizzly's answer was simple. Because it's the right thing to do. Reaper's laugh was short and sharp. The right thing. Jesus Christ. He shook his head, then turned to his own people. You hear that devil's backbone found religion. They're doing the right thing. The mocking tone vanished as quickly as it had appeared. You finish clearing that tree. Then you get your civilians and you get the hell out of my territory. You've got Iron Cross escort to the county line. After that, you're on your own. Grizzly's eyes narrowed. Escort? You want to get to Silver Falls, fine, but you're doing it on our terms. My boys will ride ahead, clear any obstacles, make sure you don't hit trouble. Reaper's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile. Consider it professional courtesy, veteran to veteran. He walked back to his motorcycle without waiting for a response. Within seconds, the Iron Cross bikes roared to life. 4 of them moved ahead up the highway. The other 4 positioned themselves behind the convoy. Grizzly stood frozen, clearly not trusting what had just happened. Neither did Walter, but Dorothy's voice came from the Suburban, weak but clear through the open door. Are we moving or not? I've got a grandson waiting. That broke the spell. Grizzly's people went back to work on the tree with renewed energy. The final sections were cleared in 15 minutes. The convoy reformed now with an escort of Iron Cross bikes flanking them on both sides. As Walter climbed back into the Suburban, Grizzly caught his arm. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest. Still haven't decided which. Makes 2 of us, Walter said. They rolled out at 8:43 a.m. The Iron Cross bikes led the way, the riders communicating with Grizzly via radio to warn of obstacles ahead. The tension in the Suburban was thick enough to cut. I don't trust this, Axel muttered from the driver's seat. Iron Cross doesn't help anyone, especially not us. Doesn't matter if we trust them, Grizzly replied. Matters that they're getting us through their territory faster than we could manage alone. Doc Matthews was checking Dorothy's pulse again. Heart rate's elevated. She needs rest. She can rest in Silver Falls, Dorothy said. How much further? 120 miles, maybe 5 hours. Then let's stop talking and start driving. The convoy pushed forward into the white wilderness. The landscape was brutal pine forests weighed down with snow, frozen rivers cutting through valleys, mountains looming in the distance like sleeping giants. The highway was a ribbon of white cutting through it all, and they were the only vehicles on it. At mile marker 73, the Iron Cross lead bike pulled over. Its rider dismounted and walked back to Grizzly's window. It was Reaper again. Grizzly rolled down the window. Problem. County line's 2 miles ahead. After that, you're out of Iron Cross territory. You're on your own. Reaper paused. There's something you should know. Weather report says another storm's coming in this afternoon, bigger than the last one. If you're not in Silver Falls by 2 p.m., you're not making it at all. Grizzly checked his watch, 11:47 a.m. We'll make it. Maybe? Reaper looked past him at Walter and Dorothy. Hey, old man, you get to that grandson, you tell him his great-grandfather would have been proud. Anyone who fights that hard for family deserves to win. Before Walter could respond, Reaper was back on his bike. The Iron Cross escort pulled away, engines fading into the distance, leaving Devil's Backbone alone on the highway. Well, Axel said, that was unexpected. Keep driving, Grizzly ordered. We've got 2 hours to cover 80 miles. It's going to be tight. At 12:34 p.m., disaster struck. The lead truck radioed back with panic in the driver's voice. Rock slide ahead. The whole damn mountainside came down, the roads completely blocked. Grizzly's fist slammed against the dashboard. How bad? Bad, real bad. Rocks the size of cars, Grizz. Hundreds of them. There's no way through. Walter felt Dorothy sag against him. They'd come so far, fought through so much. And now this. Is there another route? He asked desperately. Axel was already pulling up a map on his phone. There's a logging road that connects back to the highway about 30 miles north. But it's probably not plowed. Might not even be passable. How long would it take? In good conditions, 40 minutes. Today could be 3 hours. Could be never. Grizzly's radio crackled. It was the lead truck again. Grizz, we've got maybe 90 minutes before that next storm hits. If we're going to make a call, we need to make it now. Dorothy's voice was barely a whisper. We're not going to make it, are we? Walter couldn't answer. Because he didn't know. He looked at Grizzly, at this man who'd risked everything for strangers, and saw the same uncertainty in his eyes. Then Grizzly's expression changed, hardened. "Everybody out," he ordered into the radio. "We're moving these rocks by hand." Doc Matthews' head snapped around. "Are you insane? Those rocks weigh hundreds of pounds. Some of them weigh tons. You'll kill yourselves." "Then we die trying." Grizzly was already opening his door. "But we don't quit. Not when we're this close." He stepped out into the snow, and one by one every member of Devil's Backbone MC followed him. Walter watched through the Suburban's windshield as 12 bikers stood before a mountain of rock that should have required heavy equipment and a week's worth of work. Grizzly was already rolling up his sleeves, his breath visible in the frigid air. "This is suicide," Doc Matthews said. "One of those rocks shifts wrong, someone's getting crushed." "Then we better not let them shift wrong." Dorothy's hand was on the door handle. "I'm helping." "The hell you are." Walter grabbed her arm. "You can barely stand." "Then I'll sit and move the small ones." Her eyes met his, and Walter saw the same fire that had convinced him to marry her 56 years ago. "I'm not sitting in this truck while people risk their lives for me." Before Walter could argue, Dorothy was out the door. She stumbled in the snow, caught herself on the vehicle's frame, and started forward. Walter swore and went after her, Doc Matthews right behind him. The rock slide was worse up close. Boulders ranging from basketball size to small cars had tumbled down the mountainside, creating a wall 15 feet high and twice as wide. Some rocks were still settling, sending small cascades of gravel skittering down the pile. Grizzly was organizing his people with military precision. "Cheryl, Tiny, you two start on the south side. Work the smaller rocks first, create a path. Axel, get the chains from the trucks. We'll use the vehicles to pull the big ones. Everyone else pair up. Nobody lifts alone. If a rock's too big, you call for help. Pride gets you killed." Walter reached Dorothy as she bent to pick up a rock the size of a bowling ball. "Dot, please." "I need to do this, Walter." Her voice was firm despite the tremor in her hands. "These people are dying out here for us. The least I can do is move some rocks." She lifted the boulder. Her arms shook with the effort, but she carried it 10 feet and set it down beside the road. Then she went back for another. Walter felt something crack in his chest. His wife was dying. She could barely walk. And she was moving rocks because she refused to let others sacrifice without contributing. He picked up a rock himself. It was heavier than it looked, and his back screamed in protest, but he carried it to the edge of the road and dropped it. Went back for another. Around them, the Devil's Backbone MC was moving with coordinated intensity. Two bikers would lift a medium-sized boulder together, grunting with effort, shuffling their feet carefully on the icy ground. Tiny was using his massive frame to roll rocks that no one else could budge. Cheryl was directing traffic, making sure no one was working directly beneath unstable sections. Grizzly had attached heavy chains to the largest boulders. The Suburban and one of the trucks were being used as anchors, their engines roaring as they strained against tons of stone. The chains went taut, metal groaning under stress. Slowly and possibly, the rocks began to move. "Keep tension. Don't let it slip." Grizzly's voice cut through the noise. "If that chain snaps, it'll cut someone in half." The warning sent ice through Walter's veins, but no one stopped working. They couldn't afford to stop. 15 minutes passed. The pile barely looked smaller. Walter's hands were raw, despite his gloves, his back on fire, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Dorothy had sat down on a smaller rock, still moving stones from her seated position, her face gray with exhaustion. "Water break." Doc Matthews appeared with bottles, forcing them into people's hands. "You're all going to collapse if you don't hydrate." No one wanted to stop, but Grizzly nodded. 2 minutes, drink, catch your breath, then back to work. Walter gulped water, his throat burning from the cold air. Beside him, one of the younger bikers, couldn't have been more than 25, was massaging his shoulder. "You okay?" Walter asked. "Tweaked something, it's fine." The kid's face said otherwise. "Take it easy, you're no good to anyone injured." The kid looked at him with something like respect. "You fought in Korea, long time ago. My great-uncle was at Incheon. He used to tell stories." The kid paused. "He said the worst part wasn't the fighting. It was knowing people were depending on you and being scared you'd let them down." Walter understood exactly what the kid meant. "You're not letting anyone down. Look at what you're doing here. We're just moving rocks." "You're moving mountains," Dorothy said softly. She'd appeared beside them, leaning heavily on Walter. For two strangers, that's not just moving rocks. The 2 minutes ended. Everyone went back to work with renewed determination. At the 30-minute mark, they'd cleared maybe a third of the roadway. Not enough for the vehicles to pass, and the wind was picking up, harbinger of the storm Reaper had warned about. Grizzly checked his watch, his face grim. We've got 40 minutes before that weather hits. If we're not through by then and we're trapped here. Then we work faster, Axel said, grabbing another chain. They worked faster. The pace was brutal. People were slipping on ice rocks, were falling, fingers were getting smashed. One of the bikers, a woman with braided hair, dropped a boulder on her foot and went down hard. Doc Matthews rushed over, but she waved him off. Just bruised. Keep working. The woman limped back to the pile and kept moving rocks. Walter was beyond exhaustion now. His vision was swimming. His hands wouldn't close properly. But he kept moving because everyone else kept moving, and because Dorothy was still there, still lifting stones that weighed more than she should be able to lift in her condition. Almost there, Grizzly's shout cut through the fatigue. We're almost through. Walter looked up. The path was forming, still narrow, still treacherous, but it was there. The vehicles might be able to squeeze through if they were careful. Then the rock shifted. One of the massive boulders near the top of the pile, destabilized by the removal of supporting stones below it, began to slide. It moved slowly at first, grinding against other rocks, sending out a deep groan that Walter felt in his bones. Clear out! Grizzly's voice was a roar. Everybody back! The boulder picked up speed. It rolled down the pile like a massive bowling ball, crushing smaller rocks, sending up sprays of gravel. And directly in its path, focused on moving a stone and not seeing the danger, was Dorothy. Walter's heart stopped. D-O-T-I-E. She looked up, saw the boulder, froze. Walter ran. His body protested every step, but he ran harder than he'd run in 50 years. He hit Dorothy with his shoulder, driving her sideways, both of them tumbling into the snow. The boulder roared past, missing them by inches, and slammed into the guardrail with a sound like a cannon shot. The guardrail crumpled. The boulder punched through and kept going, tumbling down the mountainside, taking chunks of the road with it. Silence fell over the highway. Everyone was frozen, staring at the fresh crater in the asphalt where the boulder had been. Walter was on top of Dorothy, both of them gasping for air. Are you hurt? Dot, are you hurt? I'm okay. I'm okay. Her hands were shaking as she clutched his jacket. You saved me. Ways, Walter whispered. Always. Grizzly's face appeared above them. For once, his stone expression had cracked. That was too close. But we're fine. Dorothy let Walter help her to her feet. And we're not stopping. Not when we're this close. Mrs. Callahan. Not stopping, Dorothy repeated. Her voice was steel-wrapped in velvet. My grandson is waiting. Let's finish this. Grizzly stared at her for a long moment. Then a smile crossed his face, the first real smile Walter had seen from him. You heard the lady. Back to work. They finished clearing the road at 1:17 p.m. The path was barely wide enough for the vehicles with inches to spare on either side, but it was enough. Grizzly sent the lead truck through first, watching with hawk eyes as it navigated the gap. The truck scraped against a boulder, metal shrieking, but made it through. One by one, the vehicles followed. The Suburban was last. Axel took it slow, adjusting constantly, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Rocks scraped both sides. The passenger mirror shattered against a boulder, but they made it through. As soon as the last vehicle cleared the rock slide, the sky opened up. Snow began falling in thick sheets, visibility dropping to almost nothing within minutes. Here comes the storm, Axel muttered. Right on schedule. Grizzly was on the radio immediately. Convoy, tighten up. Nobody gets more than 50 feet from the vehicle ahead. We lose sight of each other in this, we're done. The convoy pressed forward through the blizzard. The highway was disappearing beneath fresh snow, making it nearly impossible to tell where the road ended and the drop-offs began. Axel was driving by instinct, more than sight, following the faint taillights of the truck ahead. Walter held Dorothy close. She'd fallen asleep again, or maybe passed out, he couldn't tell which. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cold despite the heater. Doc Matthews had checked her vitals twice in the last 10 minutes, his face growing more concerned each time. How much further? Walter asked. 20 miles to Silver Falls, Grizzly said. If the roads hold, If we don't slide off into a ravine, if 100 other things don't go wrong, what are our odds? Grizzly looked at him in the rearview mirror. You really want to know? Walter thought about it. No, I really don't. The storm intensified. The Suburban's wipers were working overtime, barely keeping the windshield clear. The wind was strong enough to rock the vehicle, and several times Axel had to fight to keep them on the road. At mile marker 12, the radio crackled. Lead truck here, we've got a situation. There's a bridge ahead. Stone Creek Bridge. Looks unstable. Grizzly swore. How unstable. The approach is iced over and I can see cracks in the concrete. This thing wasn't built for this kind of weather. I don't know if it'll hold. Is there another route? Not without backtracking 30 miles. And in this storm, that's suicide. Grizzly was silent for a moment. Can we cross it? One vehicle at a time, maybe, but if it fails with someone on it, the implication hung in the air. If the bridge collapsed, whoever was crossing would go into Stone Creek. In this weather and water that was probably half frozen, they'd have maybe 2 minutes before hypothermia killed them. What do we do? Axel asked. Grizzly's jaw clenched. We cross, one at a time, lightest vehicles first. If it holds, everyone follows. If it doesn't, he didn't finish. The convoy came to a stop. Through the snow, Walter could see the bridge. It was maybe 50 feet long, spanning a creek that had carved a deep gorge through the rock. The stone supports looked old, weathered by decades of Montana winters. And even from a distance, Walter could see the cracks Grizzly's lead driver had mentioned. Lead truck, you're up, Grizzly said into the radio. Take it slow. If you hear anything crack, anything at all, you floor it and get across, understood? Copy that. Walter watched the lead truck approach the bridge. It crept forward, tires crunching on ice. The bridge groaned as the truck's weight settled onto it. The sound made everyone in the Suburban tense. The truck kept moving. Slowly, so slowly. Halfway across. 3/4. Almost there. A crack like a gunshot echoed across the gorge. The bridge shuddered. Go, go, go! Grizzly's voice was a roar. The truck's engine screamed as it accelerated. Its rear tires spun on ice, fighting for traction. The bridge groaned again, deeper this time, and Walter saw one of the support stones shift slightly. The truck's front tires hit solid ground on the far side. Then the rear tires. The vehicle fishtailed, but made it, pulling to a stop 50 feet past the bridge. Everyone in the Suburban released a breath they'd been holding. One down, Grizzly said. Next vehicle. They went one by one. Each crossing took years off Walter's life. Each groan from the bridge made his heart stop. But one by one, the vehicles made it across, until only the Suburban remained. Our turn, Axel said. His voice was steady, but Walter could see the fear in his eyes. Wait. Dorothy's voice was weak but clear. She'd woken up. What if we walk across less weight on the bridge? In this storm, Doc Matthews shook his head. You can barely stand, Mrs. Callahan. You'd never make it. Then carry me, but don't risk the vehicle. If that bridge goes down with all of us in it, we all die. At least this way, if it collapses, you can get away. Grizzly turned to look at her fully. You're serious. Do I look like I'm joking? A moment of silence, then Grizzly nodded slowly. She's right. Axel, you drive the Suburban across empty. The rest of us walk. Grizzly, that's insane, Doc Matthews started. It's smart. Mrs. Callahan's smart. Grizzly was already opening his door. Axel cross first. If the bridge holds, we follow. If it doesn't, we're not in the vehicle when it goes down. They climbed out into the blizzard. The wind hit Walter like a physical force, nearly knocking him off his feet. Grizzly scooped Dorothy up like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest to protect her from the worst of the weather. Axel got back behind the wheel. Through the snow, Walter could barely see his face, but he saw Axel cross himself before putting the Suburban in gear. The vehicle approached the bridge. Walter's heart was in his throat. This was it. This was the moment that would either get them to Silver Falls or end everything. The Suburban's front tires touched the bridge. The structure groaned. Axel kept moving steady and smooth, no sudden movements. The entire bridge was shaking now, vibrating under the vehicle's weight. Halfway across, the groaning was constant now, a deep rumbling that Walter felt in his chest. One of the support stones was definitely shifting, tilting outward at an angle that made Walter's stomach drop. 3/4. Almost there. Almost. The stone gave way with a crack like thunder. The bridge sagged on one side, dropping 6 inches in a heartbeat. The Suburban tilted 2 wheels, leaving the ground. Walter heard himself scream, "Axle!" But Axle was already moving. The engine roared. The rear tires that were still on the ground, the spun smoking, fighting for purchase. The Suburban teetered on the edge of disaster, 2 wheels on solid bridge, 2 wheels on nothing but air and momentum. For a moment, a single frozen moment, it could have gone either way. Then the tires caught. The Suburban lunged forward like a living thing, all 4 wheels slamming back onto the bridge. It shot across the remaining distance and skidded to a stop on solid ground, steam rising from the hood. The bridge gave one final groan and sagged another foot, but it held. "Our turn," Grizzly said. He was already moving Dorothy in his arms, heading for the bridge. Walter and Doc Matthews followed. The wind was shrieking now, driving snow into their faces hard enough to sting. The bridge swayed beneath their feet, creaking ominously with each step. Walter could see through the gaps in the stones to the creek below, dark water rushing over ice-covered rocks. "Don't look down. Don't think about falling. Just keep moving." They were halfway across when Dorothy spoke. Her voice was so quiet, Walter almost missed it over the wind. "Walter, I'm scared." "I know, Dot. Me too. What if Thomas doesn't want to see us? What if we came all this way and he slams the door in our faces? Then we deal with it, but at least we tried." Trying enough, Walter had no answer for that, because he didn't know. He'd spent 7 years wondering the same thing. They reached the far side of the bridge just as another support stone shifted. Behind them, the entire structure settled another 6 inches with a groan that sounded like the earth itself breaking. "We're not using that bridge again," and Doc Matthews said, staring back at it. "Even if we wanted to, it won't hold another crossing." "Don't need to," Grizzly replied. "Silver Falls is ahead. We're not going back." They climbed into the Suburban. Axel's hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but his voice was steady. "That was the worst thing I've ever done, and I've done a lot of bad things." "But you did it," Grizzly said, "and we're still alive. That's all that matters. Now let's finish this." The final strict route to Silver Falls was a blur of white. The storm was at full force now, and visibility was measured in feet rather than miles. But the convoy pressed on, following the GPS because the road markers had long since disappeared beneath the snow. At 2:43 p.m., the lead truck's radio crackled. "I see lights, buildings. I think we're here." Walter's pulse jumped. "We made it." "Not yet," Grizzly cautioned. "We made it to Silver Falls, Shaz. But your son, that's a different challenge." The convoy rolled into town, a community of maybe 3,000 people, huddled against the Montana wilderness. The main street was nearly deserted, most residents smart enough to stay inside during the storm. The few buildings that showed lights looked warm and inviting after the brutal journey. Grizzly pulled out the letter from Thomas's ex-wife. Sarah's letter with an address written in careful handwriting. 327 Maple Street. That's where the letter came from. "Let's go there," Dorothy said. She was sitting up now, more alert than she'd been in hours. Fear and hope warred in her eyes. The convoy navigated the small town streets until they found Maple. 327 was a small house, white with blue shutters, a covered porch, a pickup truck in the driveway. Lights glowed in the windows. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was home. Grizzly parked the Suburban at the curb. For a moment, no one moved. This was it. The moment they'd fought through blizzards and rock slides and collapsing bridges to reach. And now that they were here, Walter found himself paralyzed with fear. What if he doesn't forgive us? The words escaped before Walter could stop them. "Then you walk away knowing you tried," Grizzly said. "That's more than most people can say." Dorothy took Walter's hand. Together. Always. They climbed out of the Suburban into the snow. The rest of Devil's Backbone MC stayed in their vehicles, giving Walter and Dorothy space but ready to provide support if needed. Walter and Dorothy walked up the path to the front door, their feet crunching in fresh snow. Walter's hands shook as he reached for the doorbell. Before he could press it, the door opened. A woman stood there, late 30s, auburn hair, kind eyes. Sarah from the photo that had been included with the letter. "Can I help you?" She looked confused, then recognition dawned. "Oh my God, Walter, Dorothy." "Hello, Sarah," Dorothy said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. "I didn't think when I sent that letter, I didn't know if you'd even get it." And then when you didn't respond, I thought, she stopped. Come in. Please come in out of the cold. They stepped inside. The house was warm, filled with the smell of something baking. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. A backpack sat by the stairs. Is Thomas here? Walter asked. Sarah's expression shifted. He's at work. He manages a garage downtown. Won't be home for another hour. She paused, studying Dorothy. You look sick. I am sick, Dorothy said simply. That's why we're here. I needed to see my grandson before. Before, Sarah understood. He's upstairs, playing in his room. His name is Matthew. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. Matthew? That's Walter's middle name. I know. Sarah's own eyes were wet now. Thomas never stopped. She broke off. Let me get him. She disappeared up the stairs. Walter and Dorothy stood in the entryway holding each other up, two old people who traveled through hell for this moment. Footsteps on the stairs. A small voice saying, But Grandma said I should finish my homework first. I know, sweetie, but there's someone here who wants to meet you. A boy appeared at the bottom of the stairs, 7 years old, tow-headed with Thomas's stubborn chin and Dorothy's gentle eyes. He looked at the two strangers in his house with the careful wariness of a child who'd been taught not to talk to people he didn't know. Dorothy made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She dropped to her knees, not caring that it hurt, not caring about anything except the boy standing 5 feet away. Hello, Matthew, she whispered. I'm your grandmother, Dorothy, and this is your grandfather, Walter. Matthew looked at Sarah. She nodded encouragement. He took a tentative step forward. My dad told me about you, Matthew said. He said you lived far away. We did, Walter said. His voice was shaking. But we wanted to meet you. Very, very much. Are you really my grandparents? We really are. Matthew studied them with the serious expression children sometimes have when they're trying to understand adult things. Then he said, Why are you crying? Dorothy laughed, tears streaming down her face. Because I'm happy. Because I've wanted to meet you for so long, and now you're here and you're perfect. I'm not perfect. I got a C in math. That made Dorothy laugh harder. She held out her arms. Can I have a hug? Matthew hesitated for just a moment. Then he walked forward and let Dorothy pull him into an embrace. She held him like he was made of glass and gold, like he was the most precious thing in the world. Because he was. Walter watched his wife hold their grandson for the first time and felt something in his chest that had been broken for 7 years finally start to heal. Then the front door opened behind them. Cold air rushed in, and a voice Walter hadn't heard in 7 years said, Sarah, whose vehicles are... The voice stopped. Walter turned slowly. Thomas stood in the doorway. Work boots tracked with snow grease stains on his jacket. He'd aged gray in his hair on lines around his eyes. But he was still Thomas. Still the son Walter had raised and loved and lost. Father and son stared at each other across the room. 7 years of silence hung between them like a wall. Thomas's face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds. Shock, disbelief, confusion, and finally settling into something harder. What are you doing here? Walter's mouth went dry. All the words he'd rehearsed during the 1,300-mile journey evaporated. Tommy, don't call me that. Thomas's voice was ice. I asked you a question. What are you doing in my house? Dorothy slowly released Matthew, her hands still trembling. We came to see you, to see our grandson. You don't have a grandson. Thomas's eyes were hard. You made that clear 7 years ago when you told me I'd never amount to anything, when you said I was throwing my life away. I never said that. You said exactly that. Thomas's voice rose and Matthew flinched. Sarah moved closer to the boy, putting a protective hand on his shoulder. You said investing in a garage was stupid, that I was being irresponsible, that I didn't think things through. Walter found his voice. We were worried about you. We didn't want you to lose everything. What you didn't want was for me to make my own choices. Thomas was shaking now, years of buried anger flooding out. My whole life, you second-guessed every decision I made. The girl I dated wasn't good enough. The college I chose wasn't prestigious enough. The career I wanted wasn't stable enough. Nothing I did was ever enough for you. The words hit Walter like physical blows, because they were true, every single one of them. You're right, Walter said quietly. Thomas stopped mid-breath. What? You're right about all of it. Walter's voice cracked. We did second guess you. We did think we knew better. We were wrong. You think you can just show up here after 7 years and say you were wrong? You think that fixes anything? No. Dorothy stepped forward, her legs barely supporting her. No, we don't think it fixes anything. But Tommy Thomas, I'm dying. The word dropped into the room like a bomb. Thomas's angry expression flickered. What? Cancer. Stage 4. The doctors said 6 months. That was 4 months ago. Dorothy's voice was steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I don't have time to wait for the perfect moment or the perfect words. I needed to see my grandson before I die. That's why we're here. Thomas stared at her. His face had gone pale. You're lying. I wish I was. This is just another manipulation, just like always. Make me feel guilty so I'll look at her, Thomas. Walter's voice was sharp. Really look at her. Thomas did, and Walter saw the moment reality hit his son, saw Thomas register the weight loss, the hollow cheeks, the way Dorothy was swaying on her feet, the color that had drained from her over the past months. Oh my God, Thomas whispered. Dorothy swayed. Walter caught her, but his own legs were giving out. They both started to fall when Thomas moved. He crossed the room in 3 strides and caught his mother supporting her weight with the same strong arms that had once thrown footballs in the backyard of their Millbrook home. Mom, the word came out broken. Mom, I'm okay. But Dorothy clearly wasn't. Her breathing was labored, her face gray. Sarah was already moving. Matthew, go to your room, sweetie. But now, Matthew. The boy ran up the stairs. Sarah turned to Thomas. Get her to the couch. I'll call Dr. Reynolds. Thomas carried Dorothy to the living room couch with surprising gentleness. Walter followed his own body, screaming in protest after the day's exertions. As Dorothy settled onto the cushions, her eyes found Thomas's face. You have your father's eyes, she said softly. Did you know that when you were little, you'd look at me with those same eyes and I could never stay mad at you? Thomas's jaw clenched. Don't do this. Don't do what? Don't try to make this okay. Don't act like 7 years didn't happen. I'm not trying to make it okay. Dorothy reached for his hand. He pulled back, but she persisted, catching his fingers. What happened 7 years ago was terrible. The things your father and I said were unforgivable. But I'm asking you to forgive us anyway. Why should I? Because I'm your mother and I love you. And I don't have much time left to tell you that. The front door opened again. Grizzly stepped inside his massive frame, filling the doorway. Behind him, Walter could see Cheryl and Tiny on the porch. Thomas's head snapped up. Who the hell is that? That's Grizzly, Walter said. He and his people are the reason we made it here alive. Your people? Thomas looked between Grizzly and his parents. You came here with bikers. It's a long story, Walter said. Grizzly's eyes swept the room, taking in the tension. The tears, the confrontation. We interrupting something? Yes, Thomas said at the same time Dorothy said no. We just wanted to make sure Mrs. Callahan was okay, Grizzly continued. That bridge crossing took a lot out of her. Bridge crossing? Thomas looked at his mother. What bridge crossing? Where did you come from, Illinois? Walter said. We drove from Millbrook. In this weather, are you insane? Probably, Dorothy admitted. Our truck broke down on Route 47. We walked for hours in the snow. I collapsed. These people saved us. Then they brought us here through a blizzard and a rock slide and a bridge that almost killed us all. Thomas was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. You almost died getting here. Several times, Walter said, but we made it. This is insane. This is completely insane. Thomas ran his hands through his hair. You risked your lives. You got strangers to risk their lives just to come see me. To see you and Matthew, Dorothy corrected. And yes, because some things are worth risking everything for. Sarah appeared from the kitchen with a glass of water and some pills. Dr. Reynolds is on his way. He said to keep you warm and hydrated until he gets here. She helped Dorothy take the medication, then looked at Thomas. Maybe we should give your parents some space to rest. Space, Thomas's laugh was bitter. They show up out of nowhere after 7 years, nearly die, getting here, bring a motorcycle gang to my house, and you want me to give them space. I want you to calm down before you have a heart attack, Sarah said firmly. And they're not a gang. They're the people who saved your mother's life. Grizzly cleared his throat. We'll wait outside. Give you folks time to talk. No, Dorothy's voice was weak but insistent. Stay, please. I want Thomas to hear what you did for us. Thomas looked ready to argue, but something in his mother's expression stopped him. He nodded stiffly. Grizzly stepped fully inside, followed by Cheryl and Tiny. The small living room suddenly felt very crowded. Walter saw Thomas studying the bikers, the leather vests, the patches, the tattoos. Saw his son making judgments, making assumptions. Your parents showed up at our clubhouse last night, Grizzly began. His voice was matter-of-fact, no emotion, just reciting events. Your mother was hypothermic, pulse thready breathing, shallow skin temperature, 87 degrees. Another 20 minutes and she would have been dead. Thomas's face went white. We stabilized her, Grizzly continued. Got her warm, got fluids in her, kept her alive through the night. In the morning, we loaded up and drove them here. Hit a rock slide at mile marker 73. Spent 90 minutes moving boulders by hand. Your mother helped. Moved rocks while she could barely stand. That's not, she couldn't have. Thomas looked at Dorothy. I did, Dorothy said simply. Everyone was working so hard for us. I couldn't just sit and watch. Then we hit the storm, Grizzly went on. Visibility dropped to nothing. Roads disappeared. We came to Stone Creek Bridge. Structure was compromised, cracked supports, covered in ice. Your mother suggested we walk across instead of risking the vehicle's weight. She was right. The bridge almost collapsed with just a Suburban on it. Thomas had sat down heavily in a chair. His face was the color of old snow. You walked across a collapsing bridge. Your father carried me, Dorothy said. She was looking at Walter now, her eyes soft. Well, Grizzly carried me, but your father was right there. Why? Thomas's voice broke on the word. Why would you do all this? Because you're my son, Dorothy said, and Matthew is my grandson, and I've wasted 7 years being angry and hurt and stubborn. I don't have 7 more years. I don't even have 7 months. So I'm here now asking, begging for you to give me whatever time is left. The room fell silent. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, a family that had been shattered was trying to figure out if the pieces could still fit together. Thomas stood abruptly. I need air. He walked to the front door, yanked it open, and stepped onto the porch. The cold blasted in, but he didn't seem to notice. He just stood there staring out at the snow-covered street, his shoulders shaking. Walter started to follow, but Grizzly's hand on his shoulder stopped him. Give him a minute. He's my son, which is exactly why you need to give him a minute. Grizzly's voice was gentle. This is a lot to process. Let him process. Sarah was checking Dorothy's pulse again, her face concerned. Your heart rate's elevated. You need to rest. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're exhausted and sick, and you just crossed Montana in a blizzard. Sarah's voice was firm. Dr. Reynolds will be here in 10 minutes. Until then, you're lying down and staying quiet. Dorothy started to argue, then sagged back against the cushions. Okay, you're right. Walter sat beside her, taking her hand. It was cold despite the warmth of the house. He rubbed it between his palms, trying to bring some heat back. Do you think he'll forgive us? Dorothy whispered. I don't know, Dot. I hope so. On the porch, Thomas was still standing in the snow. Cheryl had followed him out, and Walter could see them talking. Couldn't hear the words, but could read the body language. Thomas was gesturing wildly. Cheryl was standing calmly, letting him vent. After a few minutes, Thomas's gestures slowed, stopped. He bent forward, hands on his knees like he was trying to catch his breath. Cheryl said something. Thomas looked up at her. Then to Walter's shock, his son started crying. Not quiet tears, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. Cheryl put a hand on his shoulder, steady and supportive, and just let him break. Walter felt his own throat tighten. When was the last time he'd seen Thomas cry? The boy had always been stoic, always holding everything in, just like Walter had taught him. God, what had Walter done to his son? The front door opened. Thomas came back inside, Cheryl behind him. His eyes were red, his face blotchy, but something in his expression had shifted. The hard anger had cracked, revealing the hurt underneath. He walked to the couch where Dorothy lay, dropped to his knees beside her arm. Tell me about the cancer. Dorothy's hand touched his face. Stage 4 pancreatic, spread to my liver and lungs. They gave me chemo, but it didn't work. Now we're just trying to keep me comfortable. How long? Weeks, maybe a month. Thomas closed his eyes. I'm so sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for. I do. I should have called. Should have come home. Should have let you meet Matthew years ago. I was just so angry, and then the years kept passing, and it got harder and harder to pick up the phone. I know, Dorothy whispered. We felt the same way. Every day I wanted to call you. Every day I told myself tomorrow. And then tomorrow never came. I named him Matthew because of Dad, Thomas said. His voice was shaking. Matthew Walter Callahan. I wanted him to have a piece of you even if you never met him. Walter felt something break open in his chest. You named him after me. I was mad at you. I was furious. But you were still my father. Thomas looked at Walter for the first time with something other than anger. I wanted my son to know where he came from. The doorbell rang. Sarah answered it, admitting a man in his 60s carrying a medical bag. Dr. Reynolds? He took one look at Dorothy and went straight to work, checking vitals, asking questions, examining her with practiced efficiency. After several minutes, he sat back. You're severely dehydrated and exhausted. Your blood pressure's dangerously low. And if I'm reading your history correctly, he glanced at the medication bottles Sarah had brought him. You missed at least 3 doses of your pain medication. We were traveling, Dorothy said weakly. You were dying. Dr. Reynolds' voice was blunt, but not unkind. Mrs. Callahan, in your condition, that journey could have killed you. Should have killed you, frankly. The fact that you're alive is a minor miracle. Major miracle, Grizzly corrected from across the room. You should have seen what she survived. Dr. Reynolds looked at the bikers, clearly trying to figure out their role in all this. Then he shook his head, apparently deciding it didn't matter. You need rest. Real rest. No more cross-country drives through blizzards. How long does she have? Thomas asked. His voice was steady, but Walter could hear the fear underneath. Dr. Reynolds hesitated. I can't say for certain without seeing her full medical records. But based on what I'm seeing now and the medication she's on, weeks, maybe less if she doesn't rest. The room went silent. Dorothy's hand tightened around Walter's. Then she rests here, Thomas said. His voice left no room for argument. Mom, Dad, you're staying with us for however long. He couldn't finish, didn't need to. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. You mean it? Yeah, Mom, I mean it. What about the anger, the things we said? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. It's still there. I'm not going to lie and say it's gone. But you drove through a blizzard and almost died trying to see me, trying to meet my son. That's got to count for something. He paused. And life's too short to waste time being angry. I learned that the hard way. Sarah was crying now, not bothering to hide it. I'll make up the guest room. I'll help, Cheryl offered. As the women headed upstairs, Dr. Reynolds finished his examination. I'm leaving some medication for pain management. She needs to take it every 6 hours, no exceptions. And she needs to eat even if she doesn't feel like it. Small meals frequently. Can you handle that? We can handle it, Thomas said. Dr. Reynolds nodded, packed up his bag, and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned back. Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, I don't know what you went through to get here, but I'm glad you made it. After he left, the house felt quieter. The bikers were still there, filling the space with their presence. Walter realized they'd been standing guard the whole time, ready to help if needed. We should go, Grizzly said. Let you folks have some family time. Wait, Thomas stood up. I don't know how to thank you, any of you. You saved my parents' lives. Multiple times. We did what anyone would do, Grizzly said. No, you did what most people wouldn't. Thomas's voice was thick with emotion. What most people couldn't. And I need you to know that I'll never forget it. My son will never forget it. Tiny spoke up for this first time, his voice surprisingly soft for such a large man. Your mom's a fighter. Moved rocks with us in the snow. Didn't complain once. And your dad, Cheryl added, he begged us for help on his knees. In the freezing cold. Would have done anything to save her. That's love. Real love. Thomas looked at his parents with new eyes. I didn't know about any of it. Now you do, Walter said simply. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Matthew appeared still in his pajamas despite it being mid-afternoon. Mom said Grandma and Grandpa are staying with us. The joy in his voice made everyone smile. Dorothy held out her arms, and Matthew ran to her, climbing onto the couch beside her with the fearless affection only children have. "That's right, sweetheart," Dorothy said, wrapping her arms around him. "We're going to stay for a while." "How long?" Dorothy and Thomas exchanged glances. "As long as we can," Dorothy said softly. Matthew seemed satisfied with that answer. He snuggled against Dorothy, chattering about school and his friends and the snow fort he was building in the backyard. Dorothy listened like every word was precious, her hand stroking his hair with infinite tenderness. Walter watched his wife with their grandson and felt tears streaming down his face. This moment right here, this was what they'd fought for, what they'd risked everything for. Grizzly touched Walter's shoulder. "We're heading out. There's a motel on the edge of town. We'll crash there tonight, head home in the morning once the storm passes." Walter stood, his body protesting every movement. I don't know how to repay you." "Don't need repayment. Just needed to see this through." Grizzly looked at Dorothy and Matthew on the couch. "That right there, that makes the whole trip worth it. You saved us, all of you. When you could have turned us away, you saved us." "You saved yourselves," Grizzly said. "We just drove the vehicles." But Walter knew better. Without Devil's Backbone MC, he and Dorothy would be frozen corpses on Route 47. Without Grizzly's medical training, Dorothy would have died of hypothermia. Without the entire crew's determination, they never would have cleared that rock slide or crossed that bridge. One by one, Walter shook hands with each biker, thanked them with words that felt inadequate. Cheryl hugged him, her tough exterior cracking to show genuine warmth. Tiny's handshake nearly crushed Walter's fingers, but the gentle way he said, "Take care of her," made up for it. Grizzly was last. He gripped Walter's hand, his scarred face serious. "Remember what I said about my son?" "You're going to call him on," Walter said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, I'm going to call him. Tonight. Because if your stubborn old ass can drive through a blizzard to fix your mistakes, I can pick up a damn phone, okay? He'll be glad to hear from you. Maybe, maybe not, but I'll never know if I don't try." Grizzly released Walter's hand. "You take care of your family. Make the most of whatever time you have got." "I will, I promise." The bikers filed out into the storm, their footsteps fading, their vehicles starting up one by one. Through the window, Walter watched them drive away, these unlikely angels who'd appeared in his darkest hour. Sarah came back downstairs with fresh blankets. "The guest room's ready, and I made some soup chicken noodle. Dorothy needs to eat something." "Thank you," Walter said, "for everything, for sending that letter, for opening your door, for not throwing us out." Sarah's smile was sad. "I've watched Thomas carry around pain for 7 years. Watched him tell Matthew stories about grandparents he'd never meet. I knew what it was doing to him. When I sent that letter, I was hoping. I didn't know if you'd come, but I was hoping. Best hope I've ever received." Thomas appeared with bowls of soup. He handed one to Walter, then sat beside his mother and Matthew, helping Dorothy hold her bowl with shaking hands. The four of them sat together, 3 generations, finally reunited, eating soup while the storm raged outside. Matthew chattered endlessly, asked questions about Illinois, about what his dad was like as a kid, about whether they had any pets. Dorothy answered each question with patience and love, her face glowing despite her exhaustion. Walter watched his son with his son, saw the gentleness in Thomas's hands. As he helped his mother eat the protective way, he kept checking on her, making sure she was comfortable. Somewhere beneath the anger and hurt, Thomas was still the caring boy Walter had raised. He just needed a reason to remember. As the afternoon faded toward evening, Dorothy's eyes began to close. The medication and exhaustion were catching up with her. Thomas stood. "Let me help you to the guest room." He lifted his mother with surprising ease, carrying her the way he'd carried her hours earlier when she'd nearly collapsed. Walter followed them upstairs, his own body barely functioning. Every muscle screamed, his frostbitten toes throbbed, but his heart felt lighter than it had in 7 years. The guest room was small but warm, a bed with a quilted comforter, a dresser, a window that looked out over the snow-covered backyard. Thomas laid Dorothy on the bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. "Get some rest, Mom." "Stay," Dorothy whispered, "just for a minute." Thomas sat on the edge of the bed. Walter settled into a chair in the corner, content to watch. "Tell me about your garage," Dorothy said. "The one you wanted to buy. Did you get it?" Thomas smiled. "Yeah, took me 3 years to save up the down payment, but I got it. Callahan's Auto Repair. It's small, but it's mine. I'm so proud of you. You don't have to say that. I do. Because it's true. Dorothy's hand found his. You built something from nothing. You did it your way. And you were right, we were wrong to doubt you. You were trying to protect me. We were trying to control you. There's a difference, Ross. Dorothy's eyes were drifting closed. Your father and I, we made a lot of mistakes, but Tommy loving you was never one of them. Thomas's voice broke. I love you too, Mom. I never stopped. I know, I always knew. Within minutes, Dorothy was asleep. Thomas sat watching her, his hand still holding hers. Walter stood and moved to his son's side. She's going to die here, isn't she? Thomas whispered. Walter's throat tightened. Probably. Yeah. Good. I don't want her dying alone in some hospital room. I want her here with family where she belongs. Thank you for giving us this. Thomas looked at his father for the first time without walls between them. Did you really almost die getting here? More than once. Why risk so much? Walter thought about how to answer that, about all the complicated emotions that had driven them on this insane journey. But in the end, the answer was simple. Because some regrets you can live with, and some you can't. Not seeing you and Matthew again, that would have destroyed us, even more than the cancer. Walter paused. And because your mother deserved to meet her grandson, after everything she's been through, after everything we put her through, she deserved that much. Thomas nodded slowly. What about you? What do you deserve? A second chance, if you're willing to give me one. I don't know if I can forget. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to try, for whatever time we have left. Father and son stood in silence, years of pain and love and regret swirling between them. Then Thomas extended his hand, not for a handshake, for a hug. Walter stepped into his son's embrace and felt 30 years of distance collapse. Thomas held him tightly, and Walter realized his son was crying again. I missed you, Thomas said into Walter's shoulder. God, Dad, I missed you so much. I missed you too, son, every single day. They stood like that until the emotion passed. When they pulled apart, both men were red-eyed and raw, but something fundamental had shifted. The wall wasn't gone, might never be fully gone, but it had cracks, and through those cracks, love was finding its way back in. Come on, Thomas said. You look like you're about to collapse. When's the last time you slept? Walter tried to remember. Yesterday morning, maybe. Jesus, Dad, you're 78 years old. You can't. Thomas stopped himself, smiled slightly. Sorry, old habits. It's okay, you're right. I am about to collapse. Guest room has a pull-out couch. Not great, but it's better than nothing. It's perfect. They left Dorothy sleeping and went back downstairs. Sarah had Matthew at the kitchen table working on homework. The boy looked up when they entered. Is Grandma okay? She's resting, Thomas said. And Grandpa needs to rest too. Can I show him my room first? Please. Walter smiled. I'd love to see your room, Matthew. The boy's face lit up. He grabbed Walter's hand, his grip warm and trusting, and pulled him toward the stairs. Walter let himself be led, his heart full, despite his exhaustion. Matthew's room was exactly what a 7-year-old's room should be. Toys scattered across the floor, posters of superheroes on the walls, a bookshelf crammed with stories, a bed shaped like a race car. This is my rock collection, Matthew said, showing Walter a shoebox full of stones. And this is my baseball glove that Dad got me. And these are my drawings from art class. Walter examined each treasure with the seriousness it deserved, asked questions, listened to Matthew's excited explanations, and felt himself falling in love with this grandson he'd only just met. Grandpa, Matthew's voice was suddenly shy. Why didn't you come visit before? The question hit Walter like a punch. Your dad and I, we had a fight, a bad one, and we stopped talking to each other. That's dumb, Walter laughed despite himself. Yeah, it was pretty dumb. My friend Jake and I had a fight once about who was better at soccer. We didn't talk for a whole week, but then we missed each other, so we said sorry. That's very wise. Did you say sorry to my dad? I'm trying to. It's harder when you wait 7 years instead of 1 week. Matthew thought about that. But you're saying sorry now, so that's good. Out of the mouths of babes. Yeah, Matthew, that's good. Thomas appeared in the doorway. All right, champ. Grandpa needs to rest, and you need to finish your homework. But I want to talk more. Tomorrow, Grandpa and Grandma will be here tomorrow. Promise. Promise. Satisfied, Matthew hugged Walter a quick, fierce hug, then ran back to his homework. Thomas helped Walter get settled on the pull-out couch in the guest room, brought him extra blankets, a glass of water, pain medication for his frostbitten feet. Thank you, Walter said, for all of this. Get some sleep, Dad. We'll talk more in the morning. But at the door, Thomas paused. Dad, those bikers, Grizzly, they really risked their lives for you. They did. Why? Walter thought about Grizzly's story, about his son in Seattle, about all the broken families trying to find their way back to each other. Because sometimes the people who look the scariest are the ones who understand pain the best. And they wanted to help us fix ours. Maybe so they could believe their own could be fixed too. Thomas nodded slowly. I'm glad they were there. I'm glad you're here. Me too, son, me too. After Thomas left, Walter lay in the darkness listening to Dorothy's gentle breathing from the bed across the room. Outside, the storm was finally starting to break. Through the window, he could see patches of clear sky between the clouds, stars beginning to emerge. They'd made it. Against impossible odds, through conditions that should have killed them, they'd made it to Silver Falls, to their son, to their grandson. Walter didn't know how many days they had left. Didn't know if Thomas would ever fully forgive them. Didn't know if Dorothy would live to see Christmas or even next week. But right now, in this moment, they were together. And that was enough. Walter closed his eyes and for the first time in months, fell into peaceful sleep. Walter woke to the sound of laughter. For a moment, disoriented in the unfamiliar room, he thought he was dreaming. But no, that was Matthew's voice, bright and clear, coming from downstairs. And Dorothy's laugh, weaker but unmistakable, joining in. He checked the clock. 7:23 a.m. He'd slept for 14 hours straight. Walter pulled himself out of bed, his body protesting every movement. His feet were wrapped in bandages. Someone must have tended to them while he slept. Probably Sarah. He tested his weight on them. Pain flared but manageable. He could walk. Downstairs, he found Dorothy at the kitchen table with Matthew, both of them covered in flour. They were making pancakes, or attempting to. Matthew was stirring batter with intense concentration while Dorothy guided his hands. Not too fast, sweetheart. You'll make lumps. Like this. Perfect. You're a natural. Thomas stood at the stove, flipping pancakes onto a plate. He looked up when Walter entered. Morning, Dad. Coffee? The casual greeting made Walter's throat tight, like no time had passed, like the last 7 years were a bad dream. Coffee would be great. Sarah appeared with a mug already filled. Cream and sugar. Just black, thank you. Walter sat at the table watching his wife teach their grandson to cook. Dorothy's hands trembled, but her voice was steady, patient. Matthew hung on every word. Grandma says we're making your favorite, Matthew announced. Blueberry pancakes. They are my favorite. How did she know? Because I've been making them for you for 56 years, Dorothy said. Her eyes met Walter's, warm and loving. I know everything about you, Walter Callahan. And I know everything about you, Dorothy Ann. Thomas brought the plate of pancakes to the table. All right, Master Chef Matthew. You want to do the honors? Matthew carefully spooned batter onto the griddle, his tongue poking out in concentration. The batter spread into a misshapen blob that looked nothing like a circle, but the pride on the boy's face was unmistakable. I did it. You sure did, Dorothy said. Best pancake I've ever seen. They ate breakfast together, all 5 of them, crammed around the small kitchen table. Matthew chattered about school, a spelling test. He was worried about a friend who'd gotten in trouble for talking in class, a field trip to the Science Museum coming up next month. Next month. The words hung in the air, unspoken. Would Dorothy be alive next month? Walter pushed the thought away. Not now. Right now, they had this moment, and he was going to savor every second. After breakfast, Thomas announced he was taking the day off work. I called Pete. He can handle the garage for one day. I want to spend time with you guys. You don't have to do that, Walter started. Yeah, I do. Thomas's voice was firm. I've got 7 years of lost time to make up for. I'm starting today. They spent the morning in the living room. Dorothy on the couch wrapped in blankets. Walter beside her. Matthew showing them his school projects, his drawings, his spelling words. Thomas sat in the chair watching his parents with his son, something shifting in his expression with each passing minute. Around 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Sarah answered it, then called out, Thomas, It's for you? Thomas went to the door. Walter heard voices, surprised greetings, questions. Then Thomas was leading someone into the living room. Grizzly stood there looking somehow larger in the small house than he had on the highway. Behind him was Cheryl. We were heading out, Grizzly said. Wanted to check on Mrs. Callahan one more time before we left. Dorothy's face lit up. You came back. Couldn't leave without making sure you were okay. Grizzly's eyes swept over her professional assessment. You look better than yesterday. I feel better, thanks to you. Matthew was staring at Grizzly with wide eyes. Are you a real biker? I am. Cool. Can I see your motorcycle? Matthew, Sarah warned, but Grizzly smiled. It's outside. You want to look. Matthew's squeal of excitement could probably be heard in the next county. Thomas started to object, then stopped himself. Stay on the porch. Don't touch anything without asking. I won't, I promise. Matthew bolted for the door, Thomas following. Through the window, Walter watched his son lift his grandson so the boy could see Grizzly's bike better. Watch Grizzly explain something, pointing to different parts. Watch Matthew's face glow with wonder. Cheryl sat down across from Dorothy. You gave us quite a scare yesterday. I gave myself quite a scare. Dorothy's hand found Walter's. But we made it. That you did. Cheryl paused. I wanted to tell you something. Last night after we got to the motel, Grizzly called his son. First time they'd talked in 3 years. Walter sat up straighter. What happened? The kid answered, and Grizzly just broke down. Started apologizing, started crying, couldn't even get words out properly. His son thought someone had died. Cheryl's tough exterior cracked, showing emotion underneath. But then Grizzly pulled himself together and told him everything. About the war, about the anger, about being too scared to call, about you two and your grandson, and his kid just listened. Did they reconcile? Dorothy asked. Not exactly, but they talked for 2 hours, and they're going to talk again next week. And the week after that, it's a start. Cheryl looked at Dorothy directly. That's because of you, because you showed Grizzly that it's never too late to try. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. Tell him thank you for everything. Tell him yourself. He'll be back in before we leave. Outside, Matthew's excited voice carried through the window. Thomas was laughing, really laughing at something Grizzly had said. Walter couldn't remember the last time he'd heard his son laugh like that. Sarah brought out coffee for Cheryl. The women started talking easy conversation about nothing important and everything important simultaneously. Walter just sat holding Dorothy's hand, watching life happen around them. After about 20 minutes, Thomas and Matthew came back inside, both of them grinning. Grizzly followed with Tiny appearing behind him. Grandpa Grizzly said I can sit on his bike. Can I please? Walter looked at Thomas, who nodded. Quick photo, then they need to get on the road. They all trooped outside. The storm had passed completely, leaving the world blanketed in pristine white. The sun was so bright it hurt to look at. Grizzly lifted Matthew onto his motorcycle, steadying the boy. Thomas pulled out his phone, snapping pictures. Dorothy appeared in the doorway, wrapped in one of Thomas's coats, refusing to miss this. Sarah supported her on one side, Walter on the other. They watched Matthew beam from the motorcycle seat, watched Thomas capture the moment, watched this impossible connection between a 7-year-old boy and a battle-hardened biker who'd driven through hell to make this possible. Grizzly lifted Matthew down. The boy immediately hugged him, threw his small arms around Grizzly's massive waist and squeezed. Thank you for bringing my grandma and grandpa. Grizzly's scarred face softened. He patted Matthew's head with surprising gentleness. You take care of them, okay? They're special people. I will, I promise. Grizzly straightened and looked at Thomas. Your kid's got a good heart. He gets that from his grandma, Thomas said. His eyes found Dorothy's. She's got the biggest heart of anyone I know. Dorothy started crying, happy tears this time. Walter held her closer. One by one, the Devil's Backbone bikers said their goodbyes. Tiny shook Walter's hand with crushing strength and told him to keep fighting. Cheryl hugged Dorothy carefully, mindful of her fragility. Grizzly was last. He stood before Walter and Dorothy, this giant of a man who'd saved their lives, and for a moment seemed at a loss for words. I don't know what to say, Walter finally offered. Thank you doesn't seem enough. It's enough, Grizzly's voice was gruff. You two reminded me what matters. Family, second chances, not giving up even when the odds are impossible. He paused. I'm going to see my son next month. He lives in Seattle. I'm going to drive up there and see him face to face. That's wonderful, Dorothy said. It's terrifying, but you drove through a blizzard to see your family. I can drive to Seattle. Grizzly extended his hand to Walter. You're a tough old bastard. Don't ever forget that. Walter shook his hand, feeling the strength in Grizzly's grip. You're not so bad yourself. Grizzly turned to Dorothy. Instead of a handshake, he bent down and carefully hugged her. You fight, Mrs. Callahan. You fight as hard as you fought to get here. I will, Dorothy whispered, for as long as I can. The bikers climbed onto their vehicles. Engines roared to life, the sound echoing off the snow-covered houses. Matthew waved frantically. The convoy pulled away, heading back toward the highway, back toward their lives. But they were different now, changed by two old people who'd refused to give up. As the sound of the engines faded, Thomas put his arm around his father's shoulders. Those are good people. The best, Walter agreed. They went back inside. The house felt quieter without the bikers' presence, but it was a comfortable quiet, the quiet of family. Dorothy was fading, Walter could see it. The morning's excitement had drained her. He helped her back to the guest room, got her settled on the bed. Within minutes, she was asleep. Walter sat beside her, watching her breathe. Each breath a gift, each moment precious. Thomas appeared in the doorway. How is she tired but happy? Dad, I need to ask you something. Thomas came into the room, sat in the chair Walter had occupied last night. How much time does she really have? Walter had been dreading this question. The doctors said weeks, but that was before the journey, before the hypothermia and the exhaustion. Now, he shook his head. I don't know, maybe days, maybe hours. Maybe she'll surprise us all and last another month. Thomas's face crumpled. I wasted so much time. 7 years I could have had with her, and I threw it away because I was too proud to pick up the phone. We all wasted time. You, me, your mother. We all chose pride over family. Walter looked at his sleeping wife. But we're here now. We have today. That's more than we had yesterday. Is it enough? It has to be. They sat in silence for a while. Then Thomas spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. Tell me about her, about Mom, the stuff I don't know, the stuff from before I was born. So Walter told him about meeting Dorothy at a church social in 1967, about her terrible cooking when they first got married. She'd burned water somehow. About the miscarriage she'd had before Thomas was born, the grief that had nearly destroyed them both. About how she'd held Walter together when he came back from Korea with nightmares that made him scream in his sleep. She never gave up on me, Walter said. Even when I gave up on myself, even when the war made me into someone I didn't recognize. She held on and pulled me back. She did the same for me, Thomas said quietly. When Sarah left when the divorce happened, Mom was the one who kept me sane. She'd call every Sunday, let me vent, let me cry. And then you two had that fight about the garage, and I was so angry at both of you that I cut her off too, cut off the one person who'd always been there for me. His voice broke. God, Dad, what did I do? What we all do. You made a mistake, but you're fixing it now. Oh, am I? Or is it too late? Before Walter could answer, Dorothy's eyes opened. It's never too late. Both men jumped. They thought she was asleep. Mom, we didn't mean to wake you. You didn't? Dorothy's hand reached for Thomas. Come here, baby. Thomas moved to the bed, taking her hand. Dorothy pulled him down so she could see his face clearly. Listen to me, Thomas. You made mistakes. We made mistakes. But love doesn't have a statute of limitations. It doesn't expire because time passed or words were said. You're here now. That's what matters. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything. I know, and I forgive you. Do you forgive me? Thomas's answer was immediate. Yes. God, yes. Then we're okay. Dorothy's smile was radiant despite her exhaustion. We're going to be okay. The next few days passed in a blur of precious moments. Matthew coming home from school and running straight to his grandparents. Dorothy helping him with homework, teaching him to play cards, telling him stories about when his father was young. Thomas taking time off work to be present, really present, for the first time in years. Walter watched it all with bittersweet joy. Watched Dorothy grow weaker each day. Watched her appetite fade, her energy diminish, her pain increase despite the medication. But he also watched her smile more than she had in months. Watched her eyes light up whenever Matthew entered the room. Watched her and Thomas repair their relationship one conversation at a time. On the fourth day, Dorothy asked for something specific. I want to see Thomas's garage. Mom, you're too weak. I'm dying, not dead. I want to see what you built. Thomas looked at Walter helplessly. Walter shrugged. Your mother's stubborn. Always has been. So they bundled Dorothy in blankets and drove her to Callahan's Auto Repair. It was a small building on the edge of town with 2 bays and a small office. The sign out front, hand-painted professional, made Dorothy cry. You did this, she whispered. You really did this. I told you I would. Thomas helped her out of the car, supporting her weight. It's not much, but it's mine. It's perfect. He gave them a tour, showed them the equipment he'd bought the customers' cars in various states of repair, the small office where he did paperwork. Introduced them to Pete, his employee who'd been keeping things running while Thomas was home with his family. Dorothy took it all, and her face glowing with pride. Your father and I were fools. This is wonderful. You should be so proud. I am. Thomas's voice was thick. I just wish you'd been here to see it sooner. I'm here now. That's what counts. On the drive home, Dorothy fell asleep in the back seat, her head on Walter's shoulder. Thomas watched them in the rearview mirror, and Walter saw tears streaming down his son's face. That night, Dorothy's pain got worse. Dr. Reynolds came by, adjusted her medication, spoke in low tones with Thomas about what to expect in the final stages. Walter heard fragments of the conversation. Pain management. Keeping her comfortable. Maybe a few more days. Walter sat with Dorothy through the night. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes confused. Around 3 a.m. she woke fully, her eyes clear. Walter, too, Mom. I'm here, Dot. Did we do the right thing coming here? Yes, absolutely yes. Even though I'm dying in a strange house instead of our own bed in Millbrook. Walter thought about that. This isn't a strange house. This is our son's house, our grandson's house. This is family. And I think dying surrounded by family is exactly right. Dorothy smiled. You always know what to say. I've had 56 years of practice. 56 wonderful years. Her hand found his in the darkness. I do it all again, every minute, even the bad parts. Me too, Dot, me too. She fell back asleep. Walter kept watch, holding her hand, memorizing the sound of her breathing. The next morning, Dorothy rallied. It happens sometimes at the end, a sudden burst of energy, a final gift. She came downstairs for breakfast, ate a full meal for the first time in days, laughed at Matthew's jokes, told stories about Thomas's childhood that made everyone crack up. For a few hours, it felt like she wasn't dying at all. Like maybe the doctors were wrong. Like maybe she'd beat this thing through sheer force of will. But Walter knew better. He'd seen this before with other veterans at the VA hospital. The rally before the end, the body's last hurrah. He treasured every second anyway. That afternoon, Sarah took Matthew to a friend's house. She wanted to give the family time alone. Thomas, Walter, and Dorothy sat in the living room, just the three of them. I need to say something, Dorothy began. Her voice was weak but determined. Both of you, I need you to promise me something. Anything, Mom. Don't let this be the end. When I'm gone, don't go back to not speaking. Don't waste more years being angry or hurt or proud. Life's too short. I know that now. She looked between her husband and her son. Promise me. Promise you'll stay in each other's lives. I promise, Thomas said immediately. Dad, Walter could barely speak past the lump into his throat. I promise. Good. Dorothy settled back into the couch cushions, satisfied. That's all I needed to hear. They spent the rest of the afternoon looking at old photos Thomas had dug out of storage. Pictures of baby Thomas, toddler Thomas, teenager Thomas. Dorothy pointed to each one, telling stories Walter had forgotten, making Thomas laugh and cry simultaneously. When Matthew came home, he climbed onto the couch beside Dorothy, and she wrapped an arm around him, holding him close while Thomas read aloud from one of Matthew's favorite books. Walter watched his family, 3 generations together, and felt a peace he hadn't known in years. That night, Dorothy took a turn. Her breathing became labored. Her confusion increased. Dr. Reynolds came and went, leaving stronger pain medications, speaking quietly about final arrangements. Walter sat beside her bed, holding her hand. Thomas sat on the other side. They kept vigil together, father and son, watching the woman they both loved slip away. Around midnight, Dorothy's eyes opened. She looked at Walter with sudden clarity. "It's time, isn't it?" Walter couldn't speak, just nodded. "I'm not afraid." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I got to see my boys, got to meet my grandson. That's all I wanted." "I love you, Dorothy Ann Callahan. I've loved you since 1967, and I'll love you until the day I die." "I know," she smiled. "Best thing I ever did was say yes when you asked me to marry you. Best thing I ever did was ask." She turned to Thomas. "Take care of your father, and Matthew, and yourself." "I will, Mom, I promise." "You're a good man, Tommy. I'm so proud of you." Thomas broke down completely. "I love you, Mom. I'm sorry for—" "No more sorry, just love." Dorothy's breathing was getting shallower. "Just love." Her eyes closed. Walter felt her hand relax in his. "Mom, Mom," Thomas's voice rose in panic. But Dorothy was peaceful, her breathing slowed, each breath a little weaker than the last. Walter climbed onto the bed beside her, pulled her into his arms the way he had 10,000 times before, held her close while her life slipped away. Thomas was on the other side holding her hand, tears streaming down his face. At 2:17 a.m., Dorothy Ann Callahan took her last breath. For a moment, no one moved. The room was silent except for Thomas's sobs. Then Walter kissed his wife's forehead. "Rest now, my love. You earned it." The funeral was 3 days later. Small ceremony, just family and a few of Thomas's friends. But Devil's Backbone MC showed up, all 12 of them riding through Silver Falls in formation, paying respects to the woman they'd saved. Grizzly gave a eulogy that made everyone cry. Talked about Dorothy's strength, her determination, her love for her family. Talked about how she'd inspired him to reconnect with his own son. "Mrs. Callahan taught me that courage isn't about being fearless," Grizzly said. "It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. She was the bravest person I ever met." At the cemetery, Matthew asked if he could say something. He stood beside the casket, small and brave, and said, "I only knew Grandma for a few days, but she was the best grandma ever. She taught me to make pancakes and play cards, and she told me stories about my dad, and she hugged me like she'd been waiting her whole life to do it." His voice broke. "I wish I had more time with her." "We all do, buddy," Thomas said softly. "We all do." After the funeral, the Devil's Backbone bikers prepared to leave. Grizzly pulled Walter aside. "What are you going to do now?" Walter looked at Thomas and Matthew standing together by the grave. "I'm going to stay here, in Silver Falls. Thomas asked me to move in with them. Said Matthew needs his grandfather around." "That's good, real good." Grizzly extended his hand. "You take care of yourself, old man." "You too." "And Grizzly, when you see your son, really see him face to face. Don't waste time being scared. Just hug him. Everything else will follow." Grizzly nodded. "I'll remember that." The bikers rode away, their engines echoing through the quiet town. Walter watched them go, these angels in leather, who'd appeared when he needed them most. A week later, Walter was unpacking boxes in his new room. Thomas had converted the garage into a small apartment for him when his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Mr. Callahan. This is Marcus Morrison, Grizzly's son." Walter's heart jumped. "Is everything okay? Is your father?" "He's fine. Better than fine, actually. He's here, in Seattle. Showed up at my door 3 days ago." Marcus's voice was warm. "He told me about you and your wife, about the journey, about everything, and I just wanted to call and say thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For showing my dad that it's never too late to try. We've spent the last 3 days talking, really talking, for the first time in years." Marcus paused. "He's staying for another week. We're going to keep trying, make up for lost time." Walter felt tears sting his eyes. "I'm glad. Your father's a good man." "I'm starting to remember that. And Mr. Callahan, I'm sorry about your wife." "Thank you, Marcus. That means a lot." After he hung up, Walter sat on his bed looking at the photo he'd placed on the nightstand. Dorothy on their wedding day, young and beautiful and full of life. "We did it, Dot," he whispered. "We fixed our family, and we helped Grizzly fix his. Not bad for a couple of stubborn old fools." A knock on the door, Matthew's voice. "Grandpa Dad says dinner's ready. Can I eat with you?" Walter smiled. "I'd love that, Matthew. Come on in." His grandson bounded into the room, chattering about his day at school. Walter listened, his heart full despite the grief. Dorothy was gone. That pain would never fully heal. But her love remained in Thomas and Matthew, in the second chance they'd all been given. Some journeys end in death, but the best ones, the ones worth taking, end in love that outlasts the traveler. And this journey through blizzards and rock slides and collapsing bridges, through 7 years of silence and pain, had brought Walter exactly where he needed to be. Home, with family, where love wins in the end. Because in the end, love always wins.